I don't expect anyone to believe me. Honestly, I don't even blame them. If someone came to me with this story a year ago, I'd probably smile politely and make a note to avoid them at parties. But this is real as the knot in my gut, as real as the twitch in my left eye, and as real as the faint pressure I still feel against the back of my neck when I try to sleep. I need to say it out loud before I forget more than I already have. Before it gets worse. It started with a touch. Just that a light, insignificant graze against the back of my hand in a crowded grocery store. It was mid-January, right after a light snowfall. I remember that because the slush was still melting on the tile floor of Dawson's Market, and the cold was lingering in the air, even inside. I was standing in the checkout line, zoning out, holding a basket with 2 cans of soup and a frozen pizza. The kind of meal you grab when you haven't had the will to cook in weeks. The line was long. A woman behind me bumped into me, or so I thought. Her hand brushed the back of mine, just for a second. I turned, automatically murmuring an apology, expecting to see some stranger looking sheepish. But no one was there. There was a guy with earbuds in, looking at his phone. A woman flipping through a tabloid. And farther back, a kid playing with the cord of his hoodie. But no one had been close enough to touch me. I even glanced down at my hand, stupidly, as if it would tell me something I didn't already know. But that's when I noticed the sensation. It didn't feel like a hand had brushed mine. It felt like something was still touching me. A faint warmth, not quite pressure, but present enough to register. It didn't fade. I stood there, shifting uncomfortably, rubbing at the spot as if it were a smudge or a mark. But it wouldn't go away. I didn't sleep well that night. I kept waking up, tossing and turning. Each time I opened my eyes, I'd swear I could feel that same faint touch again, first on my hand, then on my shoulder, then the back of my neck. It was always subtle, soft, almost affectionate. That's what made it worse. The next few days, I did my best to forget about it. I buried myself in work, told myself it was nerves, stress, maybe just a coincidence. I hadn't been well lately. The new year had brought with it a lot of change, layoffs at the office, a breakup I still wasn't ready to talk about, and this general fog that clung to everything I did. I chalked it up to anxiety and tried to move on, until the mirror incident. 3 days after the touch of the store, I was brushing my teeth at 2 a.m., unable to sleep, when I caught a glimpse of something in the mirror. It wasn't clear, just a shadow, almost like a smudge across the reflective surface, but it moved. Slowly. Behind me. I turned around instantly, heart pounding in my throat, but there was nothing there. Just the bathroom, dimly lit by the single bulb above the mirror. The door cracked open to the silent hallway. I was alone, where I should have been. I stared into the mirror again. This time, there was no shadow. But my reflection, God, this is hard to explain. My reflection looked tired, yes, but also different. Almost like I was watching someone mimic me from behind the glass. My own eyes looked wrong, not fully mine, like someone else was watching me from behind them. I backed away from the sink, closed the door, and sat on the edge of my bed in the dark, heart racing. That night, the touch returned with full intensity. I felt fingers brush my cheek. The kind of gentle caress you'd expect from a lover in the dark, only colder. I froze, too afraid to move. I kept my eyes shut, telling myself it was sleep paralysis. But I could move my arms. I could shift my legs. I just didn't want to, because something told me, deep in my bones, that if I opened my eyes, I'd see someone lying beside me, breathing, staring, waiting, I didn't open my eyes until the sun came up, and when I did, the bed was empty. But the pillow beside mine was indented faintly, as if someone had been lying there. Over the next few weeks, things worsened. Slowly at first, but unmistakably. Lights flickered. Doors that I'd locked would creak open in the middle of the night. My phone would vibrate with no calls or texts. I began to see shadows in places they didn't belong, under chairs, behind cabinets, just out of sight. And the touch, that awful, lingering touch, became more frequent. It wasn't always at night now. I feel a hand on my back while washing dishes. Fingers brushing my arm while folding laundry. A gentle squeeze on my knee while I sat watching TV, alone. Always subtle. Always too long. I started recording myself while I slept. I used an old security camera app and propped my phone on the dresser. The first few nights, the footage was uneventful. Just me tossing and turning. But on the fifth night, February 4th, I woke up to find the phone on the floor. The video was still saved. I watched it immediately. For the first 3 hours, nothing strange happened. But around 3:22 a.m., the screen flickered slightly. And then I saw it. My blanket shifted. Slowly, like something crawled underneath it from the foot of the bed and slithered up toward me. My body was still. Too still. I wasn't tossing or turning. I wasn't even breathing visibly. At 3:24 a.m., my hand lifted. Not jerkily. Smoothly. Controlled, like someone else was moving it. Fingers curled upward and stretched toward the camera. And then the screen went black. No audio. No error. Just gone. I moved out of my bedroom that day. Slept on the couch. Started leaving lights on at night. Anything to make it feel less terrifying. But nothing helped. The touch followed me. The sensations grew bolder. And something began whispering my name in the silence. Never loud, just a soft exhale of syllables in the stillness of a room. Daniel. My name. No one knew I lived alone. I barely talked to my neighbors. And yet, every night, the voice came. Sometimes in the hallway. Sometimes directly behind me. And once, God help me, once from under the floor. I didn't sleep that night. Even with the windows shut and the lights on, I felt something still lingered in the room. Every time I closed my eyes, I could feel the weight of it, not on my body, but near me. Like a breath you can't hear, but feel against your skin. There was no sound, no shadow, but the sensation was as unmistakable as fingers brushing against your neck. Not cold. Not warm, just present. I got up several times to check the apartment, under the bed, behind the curtains, even inside the wardrobe, even though I hadn't opened it in weeks. I don't know what I was expecting. Nothing was ever there, yet I couldn't shake the impression that something had claimed a space in my life. Something I couldn't see. I didn't tell anyone. Not yet. There was a part of me that felt foolish. A lingering touch, hallucinations in the mirror, a bad night's sleep. It could all be stress. Work had been chaotic lately, and I hadn't been eating right. That's what I told myself. But it wasn't long before it stopped being something I could brush off. 2 days later, I was on the late evening train, heading home after staying back at the office. The car was mostly empty. Just a few passengers spaced out in silence. I was staring out the window at the dark blur of the city lights when I noticed something strange. My reflection didn't match my movement. At first, it was subtle. I tilted my head, and my reflection lagged by a fraction of a second. Then, as I stared more closely, I realized it was doing something else entirely. It wasn't me in the reflection. Not exactly. It was wearing my face, but it was Off. The mouth twitched in a way mine didn't. The eyes were darker, sunken, as though something was hiding behind them. And then it smiled. Not just a casual twitch or expression. A deliberate, slow smile, like someone savoring secret. I jerked back, my heart in my throat. I looked around. No one else seemed to notice. I glanced back at the window. The reflection was normal again. The man across from me, a tired-looking commuter in a gray coat, was now staring at me. His brow furrowed. He looked concerned. "You okay?" he asked. "Yeah, elite. Just tired." He nodded, but didn't stop watching me. That night it returned. This time, I felt it as I was brushing my teeth. I leaned toward the mirror to rinse my mouth, and then I felt it, fingers, 4 of them, distinctly press against the base of my neck. Not pushing, just resting. I spun around, sending the toothbrush flying into the sink. No one was there. My heart hammered in my chest. I walked backward out of the bathroom, never taking my eyes off the empty space behind me. My hands were shaking. I grabbed my phone and opened the camera. I turned it to video mode and aimed it at the spot where I'd felt it. Nothing. But I kept recording anyway, standing in the middle of my living room, the camera pointed at empty air. 10 minutes passed. 20. I kept it going. I was determined. If I couldn't trust my senses, maybe the lens would catch what I couldn't see. When I finally stopped the recording and played it back, there was nothing unusual. Until the very end. Right before I turned the camera off, there was a faint whisper. It was so low I could barely make it out, but I played it over and over again, holding the phone in my ear. It said, "You felt me." The next morning, I left for work early, needing to be around people, in daylight with noise and movement and logic. The apartment was too quiet, too full of possibility. As I stepped into the building's lobby, I saw someone standing just inside the entrance. An old woman. She wore a long black coat, despite the warm weather, and a scarf wrapped tight around her throat. She had her back to me, unmoving. I tried to pass her with a polite nod, but as I did, she turned slowly and grabbed my wrist. Her grip was surprisingly firm. "You've been touched," she said. Her voice was dry and cracked, like leaves on pavement. "Don't let it inside." "What?" I blinked. She leaned in close, her eyes almost milky with age. "It wants more than just contact. It needs to be felt. If you feel it too much, it stays." I pulled away, stumbling back toward the elevator. "Wait, what are you talking about?" I asked, but when I looked back, she was gone. Not walked away, not turned the corner, just gone. From that day forward, the touches became more frequent. They weren't violent, just there. Too gentle, too deliberate. They became harder to ignore. A hand sliding across my back as I did the dishes. Fingertips grazing my cheek as I lay in bed. Pressure on my waist, like someone resting their head there as I sat on the couch. I'd scream, swear, lash out at the empty room, but there was never anything to see, just the unshakable presence. That same pressure, the same intention. I bought cameras, dozens. I installed them throughout the apartment, in the bedroom, the bathroom, the hallway. I set them to record on motion. I synced them all to my phone. For 2 nights, I waited. And then, on the 3rd night, I found something. It was 3:41 a.m. The bedroom camera detected movement. When I opened the file, the footage began as normal. Me sleeping in bed, the blankets rising and falling softly with my breath. But at 3:41 and 26 seconds, the blanket shifted. It wasn't a twitch. It wasn't me. The blanket rose, as though something crawled underneath it. Something small, like the size of a child. The shape moved slowly, deliberately from the foot of the bed toward my head. I watched in frozen horror as the lump stopped just beside my face. And then I turned in my sleep, wrapping an arm around it, like I was holding it, like I wanted it there. The footage ended a minute later with no further movement. I can't live here anymore. I started packing my things. The cameras are still rolling, and I still hear whispers sometimes. But now the voice doesn't just say, "You felt me." It says, "You want me." I didn't. I don't. But I can't lie to myself either. There's a part of me, some small, desperate part, that finds comfort in the touches now. I hate admitting it, but after so many nights alone, I started waiting for it. I started missing it when it didn't come. I'm leaving, but I'm terrified it's too late. Because what if it's not just the apartment? What if it's me? What if I brought it with me the moment I let it linger? I left the apartment the next morning. I didn't pack much, just essentials. The rest I abandoned. I couldn't bear the thought of bringing anything that might carry a trace of it. I found a short-term rental on the outskirts of town, a modest one-bedroom cottage surrounded by trees. It was isolated, but that was the point. I needed distance from the apartment, from people, from myself. The first night was uneventful. No touches, no whispers, no shadows. I began to hope that maybe, just maybe, I had left it behind. Hope is a cruel thing. On the third night, I felt it again. A gentle brush against my ankle as I lay in bed. I froze, heart pounding. Then a whisper, "Found you." I leapt out of bed, turning on every light in the cottage. Nothing, but the sensation lingered, a phantom touch that refused to fade. Days turned into weeks. The touches became more frequent, more invasive. They no longer waited for nightfall. A caress on my cheek as I made breakfast. Fingers tracing my spine as I showered. I stopped sleeping. I stopped eating. I stopped living. I tried to document it. I set up cameras, audio recorders, anything that might capture evidence. But the footage was always the same. Me, reacting to something unseen. To the world, I was alone. One night, desperate for answers, I returned to the apartment building. I needed to confront whatever had started this. The building was different, darker, quieter. As I approached, I saw her, the old woman from the lobby. She stood by the entrance, watching me. "You came back," she said. "What is it?" I asked. "Why me?" She sighed. "It's not about you. It's about the touch. Once it finds someone receptive, it clings. It feeds on attention, on fear, on belief. How do I stop it?" She looked at me, eyes filled with sorrow. "You don't. You endure." I returned to the cottage, defeated. I realized that fleeing was futile. It wasn't the place, it was me. I had become its host, its vessel. The touches no longer frightened me. They became familiar, almost comforting. I began to anticipate them, to crave them. I was no longer alone. The line between my skin and what touched it had begun to blur. At first, the sensation was foreign, wrong, alien, but over time it softened. I started to feel like I was waking into its presence rather than being surprised by it. That's the terrifying part. You think the worst thing that can happen is being haunted, but the real horror is getting used to it, accepting it. I stopped reacting when it stroked my arms. I stopped flinching when I felt it press its weight behind me in bed. The recordings I kept, just for some shred of evidence, started to show longer spans of me sleeping soundly, unmoving, even as shadows passed by. And the cameras never caught the touch itself. But they did capture something else. A voice. I had left my recorder on overnight. I was too tired to check it right away the next morning. I had blacked out again, not sleep, but something like it, and when I awoke, the sheets were twisted around me like a cocoon. That wasn't unusual anymore. But when I played the recording back, at 2:44 a.m., I heard it, a whisper soft as breath, yet soaked in something wet, like a mouth not quite closed. Let me stay longer. It wasn't my voice. It was low, echoing faintly like it wasn't meant for the mic, but for me, it sounded close, closer than any voice should have been. And worse, I had mumbled something in return, something I couldn't understand. My voice, hoarse, half asleep, yet obedient. It said yes. Later that week, I caught myself in the reflection of the bathroom mirror. Not unusual, but this time, something was different. I was brushing my teeth, head low, and when I looked up, I was already looking back. My reflection was smiling before I was. Only by half a second. But it happened. I dropped the toothbrush, stared frozen. The smile vanished from my face, but stayed on my reflections just a heartbeat longer. It was enough. I backed away slowly and left the bathroom door open that night, mirror covered with a towel. It didn't help. In the dark, I still saw the shape of someone standing at the sink. I didn't know what else to do. I hadn't been to church since I was a teenager, but desperation carves out its own religion. I found a local church, told the priest that I had been experiencing something unexplainable. I was careful not to say haunted. That word felt too small now. He agreed to visit. Father Haynes arrived wearing a crisp black jacket and polite disinterest. He brought a small bottle of holy water and a Bible. The moment he stepped inside the cottage, he paused. He didn't say anything right away, just looked around slowly, nostrils flaring like he could smell something I couldn't. This place feels heavy, he said. He did a blessing in every room. He sprinkled holy water in a cross shape on the front door, murmured prayers, recited verses. But when he got to the bedroom, he stopped cold. The bed was made neatly. I had made sure of it. But the sheets, tucked tight before he arrived, were now wrinkled. Worse, dented like someone had just risen from them. I saw his hand tremble, just slightly. He looked at me and asked, "Have you ever said yes to it?" I didn't answer. He left 15 minutes later and never returned my calls. Something changed after his visit. The touches became more deliberate. Where before it was a hand on my shoulder or a brush against my back, now it lingered. A palm that pressed flat against my chest and stayed there while I slept. Fingers that curled around mine and held on when I walked through the house at night. And my skin, God, my skin. It started itching in the same spots every day, always in the exact pattern of where the touches were. I went to a dermatologist who said it was likely psychosomatic, but the look she gave me when I rolled up my sleeve to show the redness wasn't clinical. It was frightened, because under the redness, she saw indentations. 5, like finger pressure, pressed too hard and too long, like something tried to stay inside. I stopped calling them dreams after a while. They were visitations. In them, I'd wake up in bed, paralyzed, the room dark but tinged red at the corners. I could hear breathing, always too close to my ear. But when I turned, I saw myself lying beside me. Not like a clone, not a double. Me, but not just me. The other version of me was pale, mouth slightly open like it was about to speak. But instead of breathing, it shuddered, like something inside was moving beneath the skin, like something had hollowed me out and filled the space. And then I'd feel it, the hand again crawling up my thigh, fingers digging in, not to harm, but to anchor. It was trying to stay, not beside me anymore. In me. I stopped getting bills. No packages. Nothing official. But one day, I received a plain envelope. No return address. Inside was a single photograph. Black and white. A wide angle of my bedroom. Taken from a corner I didn't know had a vantage point. In the image, I'm asleep in bed. But I'm not alone. There's a figure, pitch black, featureless, lying beside me, curled against my body. Its hand is on my chest, its head on my shoulder, and my face is smiling. Now, when I look in the mirror, I see someone behind my eyes. When I close my eyes, I feel breath on my neck. I hear words whispered in my own voice. You let me in, and worse still, you needed me. I thought the worst had passed. The night I spent at the cabin in the woods had felt like a waking nightmare. But with each passing day, I convinced myself that it was only a product of my frayed nerves. The sensation of being watched had faded, and the whispers, too, became softer, like a far-off echo that barely disturbed the air. But that was the first mistake. I should have known it was never truly over. My body was sore when I woke that morning, a dull ache across my back and arms. I stretched, trying to shake off the weight of the lingering fatigue that had shadowed my every move since the cabin. It was the kind of tiredness that dug into the bones, a deep, pervasive exhaustion that went beyond sleep. I tried to dismiss it, but the air felt different that morning, heavier, thicker, like something had shifted, though I couldn't quite place what it was. It was the touch. I remember vividly the night at the cabin, feeling something cold and strange brush against my skin. But I hadn't remembered the force behind that touch. The weight, the pressure, wasn't just the sensation of something brushing me. It had felt like it was marking me. Slowly, over the next few days, I began to feel it again, that same touch. It was subtle at first, like the flick of a finger across my wrist or the pressure of someone's hand on my shoulder. But it was never anyone there. Not physically. I tried to ignore it. The pressure kept coming and going, but it never seemed to leave me. Not until one night when I was home alone, the lights dimming as the shadows stretched across the walls. I felt it again, stronger this time, not a tap or a fleeting sensation, but something that lingered, as if it was waiting for me to acknowledge it. And then I heard the whisper. It was low at first, like a breath against my ear, just beyond the threshold of hearing, but then it grew louder, the words piercing the silence like ice scraping against metal. You're mine now. I froze, my heart slamming in my chest as I turned, instinctively trying to see who was there. But no one stood in the doorway. No one was watching from the shadows. I was alone. Still, the feeling never left. It lingered behind my eyes, in the air around me, in the very space I occupied. And then came the dreams. I had always been a light sleeper, but these dreams were different. I dreamt of the cabin again, the walls stained with time and neglect, the floor creaking underfoot as if the very house were alive, breathing, waiting. In the dream, I wasn't alone, but I couldn't see the others around me. I only knew they were there because of the whispers that curled around me, tugging at my consciousness. They spoke in voices I couldn't recognize, in languages that didn't exist, but they always said the same thing. You're mine now. It was suffocating the way it closed in around me. Every corner of the dream felt like a trap, a place from which I couldn't escape. I woke up in a cold sweat, gasping for air as if I had been holding my breath for hours. But the worst part was the mark. I had noticed it a few days after I returned from the cabin. A faint discoloration on my neck, right above my collarbone. At first, I thought it was a bruise, but it never healed, never faded. It was as if it had been burned into my skin, an imprint that wouldn't leave, no matter how much I washed or scrubbed. I didn't tell anyone about it, but I couldn't stop staring at it. It wasn't just a mark. It was something else, something that seemed to change the more I looked at it. Then came the voice again, only this time it wasn't in my dreams. I was in my bathroom, brushing my teeth, when I heard it, soft, almost gentle, as if it were right behind me. I turned quickly, half expecting to see someone there, but the room was empty. The mirror reflected only my own wide-eyed face, pale and stricken. "It's time." I dropped the toothbrush, my hands trembling as the air seemed to thicken around me. My reflection was wrong. I realized. My eyes, they weren't my own anymore. They were. Deeper, darker, as if something had taken root inside them. Something that wasn't me. Something that had been there all along. That's when I knew. I had never left. The entity had followed me. It had never truly let go. It was always there, clinging to me, weaving itself into my very being. I ran out of the bathroom, unable to breathe, my pulse pounding in my ears. I grabbed my phone, desperately dialing anyone I could think of, but no one answered. The silence was deafening, oppressive, like a weight pressing against my chest. Then the touch came again. This time, it wasn't a fleeting brush of fingers. It was a firm grip, cold and unyielding, wrapping itself around my wrist like iron. I screamed, struggling, but the grip only tightened, pulling me toward the door. I stumbled back, tried to escape, but I couldn't break free. My heart raced as I heard the whispers again, closer this time, right at my ear. "You belong to me now." The walls of my house began to close in, the air thickening, the shadows growing longer, darker. The touch on my wrist dragged me toward the door, toward the darkness outside, toward the thing that had been waiting for me. I knew then there was no escape. There never had been. It had been waiting for me to acknowledge it, to realize it was always there, watching, waiting. I slammed the door open, stumbling into the night. The air was suffocating, and the ground beneath my feet felt unstable, shifting as if the world itself was trying to swallow me whole. I ran, but no matter how far I went, no matter how fast my legs carried me, I could still feel the touch on my wrist, still hear the whispers in my ear. "You're mine." I don't know how long I ran for. Time didn't seem to matter anymore. The world blurred around me, and the only thing I could focus on was the touch that never left, the grip that never loosened. And then I realized the truth. The thing had never let go. It wasn't about the cabin or the whispers. It was about the touch, the thing that lingers too long, never leaving, always waiting for the moment you forget, always ready to claim what it believes is its own. As the darkness closed in around me, I knew one thing for sure. There was no escape. It had me, and I was never getting away.